Cool. So welcome back, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of Exeposé Sport Online. I'm Harry Scott-Munro. I'm riding solo for this one. Elise has said she isn't a big fan of watching cars go around a track, but instead I'm joined by 3 of our writers, Floris, Alexander and Will, to discuss and preview the F1 2021 season, which gets underway on Friday. So thank you to all 3 of you for joining me. And first of all, if we go round, just if you don't mind introducing yourselves and a little bit about why you're so passionate about the sport.
Yeah, sure. I can go first. So my name is Floris. I've been an F1 fan now for a while. I remember my first F1 experience was going to the Singapore Grand Prix many years ago. Sebastian Vettel got me into the sport, the 3 or 4-time world champion. But now, especially with Max Verstappen at Red Bull, that's really got me and my entire family really into it. I'm Dutch, so naturally he is my hero. He's my idol at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to this year's season.
I'm Alex, and I've been into Formula One for quite a while. My dad's into it and got me and my brothers into Formula One and motorsport in general. My older brother's a massive fan of all motorsport, but I don't quite have the same level of commitment as he does to every single car event that goes on around the world. But I certainly follow Formula One pretty closely. I haven't been lucky enough to go to a race, but I have been to BTCC events and things like that. But I'm sort of we're a McLaren family, and hoping that McLaren can build on last year and get some more podiums and hopefully maybe a win or 2 this season. Yeah.
My name's Will. I've been to F1 for a good few years now. I'm again yet to go to a race, which I hate myself for every single day. But I'd say what got me to F1 was probably Daniel Ricciardo. I remember sort of seeing him a few years back, sort of seeing him bring a positive attitude to the sport and really bringing his personality into it. And I think that's what he really brought me into F1. And then from then I've sort of, learned more about the other drivers, learned more about the history of it, and then really got into the sport.
Just for everyone watching as well, then briefly from myself again, like everyone else, I've been an F1 fan for years. I've been to a good few races. I've been to 2 races. Obviously would love to go to more, but obviously cost restrictive for everybody as well. But yeah, so I think the best place for us all to start then is pre-season testing, and see the big headline from that was the speed of Red Bull and how Mercedes seem to be struggling. So the first question for all of us then is how much of that do you think is genuine pace from Red Bull, and how much of that do you think is down to Mercedes sandbagging?
I think there is certainly a level that Red Bull have a lot of pace. They've obviously got a new power unit for this year that looks like it will close the gap to the Mercedes one. I saw today that they believe that they've exceeded the Mercedes performance from last year, so that gap definitely looks like it's closed. Obviously Mercedes struggled in testing, but they have struggled in the past and come to sort of the first race and delivered, although not to the extent that they struggled this test. So be interesting to see how they respond and how going into the race at Bahrain this weekend.
You go ahead.
Go for it.
I would second that. I mean, if you look at last season, beginning in Austria, Red Bull had a pretty good thing going until obviously Albon crashed out and etc. But the whole season up until nearing the end, they sort of got closer and closer to catching Mercedes until in the final race. So you could blame on Hamilton having COVID or anything like that, but in the final race, Verstappen put up a dominant performance against the 2 Mercedes. And know as Alan said, they've got a brand new power unit for this year. And Christian Horner said about only like a couple of weeks ago that they reckon that they can build on that last race of last season and then use that to then push themselves forward. But equally, when it comes to Mercedes and sandbagging, they always do it. Like 2 seasons ago, I remember everyone thought Ferrari was gonna push through. They thought Vettel was gonna finally get his 5th. But then they got to Australia, Mercedes won too. So I feel cautious about it, but I sort of hope in a way that Red Bull can properly push for a title fight this year.
Yeah, I think there are definite indicators that Red Bull do show good performance. Like their short pace is the best out of all teams. But that being said, Mercedes' long pace, like long run pace, is much quicker. And the thing is, they've been so dominant this whole turbo hybrid era. I can't imagine Mercedes after 7 World Championship, Constructors Championship in a row to kind of drop form like that. Especially since they've been working on this car for the majority of last season as well. They're kind of looking to the future. So yeah, I can't really see Mercedes dropping too much in form. I just think that there will be a great competition between Red Bull and Mercedes, but it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top.
I suppose it's a battle that all of us that love watching F1 want to see, like Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen in 2 different teams, equal machinery, 36-year-old going for a historic 8th world title, Verstappen going for his 1st. It's that rivalry that we've all been craving for the last few years, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think definitely that's the case. I think what will be interesting will be the role of the second drivers for both teams. And obviously that will ultimately decide the Constructors' Championship. Obviously, we've seen Bottas. He's a very useful second driver for Mercedes. But what impact Checo can have at Red Bull if he does worse than expected, then I think Red Bull will have to look at themselves and look at the structure that they have in place as to whether they're developing a car just for Max Verstappen or whether it is an equal car. I think sort of Mercedes, they've always developed a car that's just a good car, and both drivers have been able to drive it, and neither has really complained. But I think with Checo at Red Bull will really highlight whether Red Bull have produced a good car or produced a good car for Max Verstappen. But yeah, that'll be an interesting to see how they do with a proven driver in their second seat.
Yeah, no, I think those second drivers are really key, but also I feel that you can't take your eye off of the fact that Hamilton and Verstappen, it's been a long time coming. People really wanted to see it last season, but alas, it didn't really happen. Hamilton clutched up the title a good few races before the season finale. And I feel like those two, because Checo even said that it would take him, 3 or 4 races, I think he said, to really get into the Red Bull car, because the oversteer in the Red Bull is notoriously difficult to handle, and at least from the driver said. But I think that those two, Hamilton and Verstappen, given the fact that Bottas has not been able to properly challenge him for how many years he's been in Mercedes now, I feel like those two will be the main driving factor, especially for this year. Next year, perhaps things will be different. Hamilton and Bottas may even be in Mercedes, but I think for this year, those two are definitely the main drivers.
And I think then looking slightly further down, we've got the midfield battle that's going to be as tight as ever. McLaren have obviously got the Mercedes power unit back in, and Danny Ricciardo joining the team as well. Who do you think is going to come out top in that midfield battle then? Obviously, Ferrari think they've made big gains over the winter as well. Obviously, Racing Point rebranded as Aston Martin looked like they might have slipped backwards a little bit. It's going to be a really interesting midfield battle again.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I was reading somewhere that the Alpine director was saying that it's almost not a midfield anymore. It's just a field because there's so much talent now. You've got McLaren, Alpine, Ferrari, AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, so much talent there. It's going to be really interesting to see so many battle it out. I think my chips would be on McLaren because they're in such good form. Zach Brown coming into the team kind of bringing some stability and some calm to the team has been really great. Daniel Ricciardo joining, teaming up with Lando Norris would be great to see. Ferrari, I'm not sure if they're quite there yet. I think they might have to turn their attention to next season when the regulations change a lot more, because even though they claim to have their pace back, I think it's still going to be tough for them, even though they have a really fresh lineup with Sainz and Leclerc. But I'd still go with McLaren for now.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. McLaren, I think, will finish third. I think the interesting package will be AlphaTauri having had such a strong test, and Gasly obviously looking to repeat last season's performances. With obviously he won in Monza, albeit in a very dramatic and extraordinary race. But I think with Tsunoda in there as well, he showed some really great pace over testing. And sort of I would pick McLaren to finish third, but at the moment I would say AlphaTauri could potentially finish fourth. As for sort of the other teams, Aston Martin obviously had quite a lot of reliability issues over testing, but so we haven't really seen their raw pace. They could finish third or fourth, but equally the midfield battle's so tight that you wouldn't be surprised if they ended up seventh at the end of the season. I think Ferrari as well, they'll if they have a good start, then they could finish third or fourth. But then I think equally, if they don't start so well, then they could almost neglect or write off this season and start developing 2022's car, and just look to that and look for a reset to ensure that their 2022 car isn't as bad as their 2020 and potentially 2021 car is if they don't get the performance that they desire out of their new car.
Yeah, no, I would again agree with that. I think with AlphaTauri and Ferrari, I think this year for them, AlphaTauri is still very much developing. I don't think they're quite there yet. And I would agree in terms of Ferrari. I think this year is basically just correct the mistakes of this year and focus on those regulation changes for next season. But I think one to really look at would be Alpine. I think there's not much chatter going on with them right now. It's everyone sort of focused on McLaren, Aston Martin. But I really think that Alpine could push through. Ocon has shown back when he was at Force India Racing Point that he was a good driver. Last season, he was going up against Daniel Ricciardo. He's still very much top of his game. I don't think that, I think he didn't really have a chance to shine. Also this year with Fernando Alonso coming back to the sport, and he, famously outperforms his equipment. I feel that they could probably not get to third. I still do feel like the battle for third would be between Aston Martin and McLaren, but I certainly think Alpine could get in there and really sort of cause some upsets between the two. Who knows? They may even get to fourth or third.
And how do you think Fernando Alonso is going to do then? Obviously, 2 years out of the sport, 39 years old now. I know Kimi's in his 40s, but that's Kimi. Everybody knows that he's a supreme talent and he's still been racing the last couple of years, but obviously with his accident before pre-season as well, it'll be a really interesting barometer to see how he does in that first race.
I think personally he's my pick for the underwhelming driver of the season. I think there's so much hype going into the season that he's probably going to disappoint some people, at least, even if he has a good season. I think if Alpine start badly, then you could see the Alonso that complained a lot, that wasn't very happy with the equipment that we saw at McLaren. Yes, he outperforms his equipment, and sort of even if he has 2 or 3 really, really great races, that could propel Alpine to third or fourth in the championship. But I think he's because of all the hype, him going in back to Renault or Alpine, where he had all his success, he's only really going to disappoint. But I think obviously he is an exceptional driver. You just have to look at like the 2012 Ferrari car, what he got out of that car, shows that he's an exceptional talent, and he will get the most out of a car, even if it is not the best package. It will just be sort of how far that gets him and how far that gets Alpine this season. And if Ocon starts well and looks like he's going to beat Alonso or is close to Alonso, then that could cause some issues within the team, and Alonso could get a bit toxic as a character within Alpine, if it's not all going his way.
I think it'll be a shock to his system as well now at 36 years old to be back in an F1 car, because this is one of the shortest pre-season testing we've seen in a while, 3 days, for him to get used to a Formula car again. So it's going to be interesting to see how he handles that at his old age. But that being said, like you said, he's an exceptional racing driver. He's got such a passion for the sport and for racing, and he's so ultra competitive. So I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of what he delivers.
I think also more than anything else, he also brings that his veteran nature to the team. He can bring that development in, much like how Raikkonen does. Raikkonen is no longer as, Kimi's not at like he was when he won the championship, or even like he was a few years ago. But he still brings in that knowledge, that extensive knowledge he's had for all those years. Same with Alonso. And I think that could really help push their development, not only for this season, but also for next season. And of course, as you say, the young talent of Ocon, hopefully we can really see him take that on and sort of, with a year back as a driver rather than a reserve driver. I think they could prove to perhaps maybe challenge for third, but if not, definitely a fourth or fifth.
On that point, on sort of Kimi and Alonso bringing their development knowledge to the team, I think that'll be something that will be the case with Aston Martin as well, with Seb. I think even though he might not be at the top of his game or where he was a few years ago, he'll definitely bring that development. He'll be able to set up the car brilliantly, and that will put them in a really good position going forward into the new regulation changes. And that will be an invaluable asset to have, having a settled driver going into the new regulation season who is such a good driver to help set up the car and manage it. I think certainly that will put Aston Martin in a really good position as well as Alpine and Kimi at Alfa Romeo.
Alfa actually looked quite good in testing in reality compared to where everyone thought they would be in terms of their baseline pace. And obviously Giovinazzi's there again as well. But looking at the rookies coming through a little bit, obviously Ferrari have got so many young drivers. Mick Schumacher's obviously at Haas. Callum Ilott, I think everyone hoped he would get a seat, but didn't in the end. But he's still going to be a reserve driver. They've got Robert Schwartzman in F2 as well. With these drivers that are coming back into the sport or staying there, the likes of Kimi, the likes of Fernando, as a fan, is it good to see them coming back, or does there reach a point where you kind of hope they'd step aside to allow that young talent and that next generation to start coming through?
I think personally, I kind of see, and I feel that both teams, there's Alpine and Alpha, obviously both have the extensive Renault and Ferrari driver academy behind them. I feel like the drivers they have right now, they may sort of be crossover drivers, especially Alonso, in terms of building development towards the next regulations and then perhaps bring on the new wave of drivers. That's on the team's perspective. In terms of the driver's perspective, I do sympathise with people like Zhou or Ilott in F2. Obviously, Ilott is no longer F2, he's now the F1 reserve driver, but I do sympathise with them in terms of, they do deserve seats, but they've been taken by these sort of veteran drivers. But equally, from the team's perspective, it could work out really well in terms of they have them in the future, but for now they're focusing on development so they can have the best of both worlds.
I think from the team's perspective, I agree. It is trying to get the best of both worlds, maybe filling one seat with an older veteran driver to help with the setup, and then filling the other seat with a younger talent that you see as a more long-term prospect. Whether Giovinazzi will be that at Alfa Romeo, I think he'll definitely, either him or Kimi will definitely be in the seat in 2022 to have some carryover and a bit of experience. Whether they then bring in a younger driver, we'll see. I think from a fan's point of view, you want to see the best drivers, and I think it is encouraging seeing more young drivers come in and it not just be dominated by established names. And it will be interesting to see how Haas go with 2 rookie drivers. But I think, it's important to have the best drivers, and the best drivers for sort of a long-term sport would be to look to lower levels. But I think for the teams, as Will said, it is important to have that balance to get the experienced driver in to help set up the car and establish the project going forward.
I mean, speaking personally, I can see a scenario for 22 where Alonso only stays for a year, and Gasly, sadly, I don't think is going to get a Red Bull promotion anytime soon. So I can see him maybe going to Renault, them having an all-French driver lineup for 22. But looking then at those rookies, obviously that would leave Tsunoda in effect as de facto team leader for AlphaTauri after just one season. The likes of him, the likes of Mick Schumacher, obviously it would be great to see the Schumacher name back in F1, but they've proved their credentials in the lower formulas and that drive. Nikita Mazepin to an extent has, although obviously he's got, I'm going to be slightly sarcastic, he's got daddy's money behind him, a little bit like Nicholas Latifi, same as Lance Stroll. Looking at those pay drivers then, and then sort of looking out a little bit further onto those rookies as well, how much of a disparity do you think there is between genuine talent that's in F1 and those pay drivers that are there because of the sponsors they bring in?
I think in terms of the pay drivers, you obviously have the examples where they are just not cut out for it. Like, I mean, Sergei Sorokin, for instance, a few years ago, just was never really on the pace. I think drivers like Lance Stroll, whereas he has all daddy's money behind him, he has, I think he won a lot in junior formulas. He has had a very successful career up to Formula One, and you don't get the results that he did by being a bad driver. And he has proved in recent seasons that he is a good driver, and isn't just there because his dad's paid for his seat. How well Mazepin will go, I don't know. That'll be a really interesting battle between Schumacher and Mazepin, and whether Schumacher's raw talent will beat Mazepin, or whether Mazepin will show himself to be more than just a pay driver. I think there are some pay drivers where it is a little bit harsh to call them a pay driver because they are clearly a very talented driver in of themselves. But obviously there are the examples like Sorokin who just aren't cut out for it and are just there because the team needs the money and they have it, so they supply it.
I think the case of, I think Mazepin is a completely different scenario in terms of him personally, as well as him as a driver. There were allegations and I think the word now, allegations and sort of controversy surrounding him. But I think in terms of sort of the other drivers such as Sorokin or even Pastor Maldonado, who has been memes to Kingdom Come, I think that they They do bring the financial stability that the teams do need at the time, and especially struggling teams like Force India. I mean, they went bankrupt until Lawrence Stroll stepped in. But I think it's just a matter of them having to try and prove the fact that they are more than simply the wealth they bring. I mean, but in terms of the actual rookie talent for this year, I think that the 3 rookies they brought along, I think Sonoda is incredible. Having one season in F2, one season in F3, and having then qualified for next season immediately, it was ridiculous. Coming 3rd in his rookie season. Schumacher, if historically he takes a while to settle into racing seasons. The previous F2 season, I don't think he was even in the top 10 in the standings. Next season, he comes along, gets first. And obviously, again, Mazepin, I think he has some proving to do, but I do think that he is a good driver. I think that they have, it's a strong class, and it will be interesting to see just how far these drivers can push themselves and whether or not they can sort of live up to the hype that they have, especially Tsunoda and Schumacher.
Yeah, I think Tsunoda will definitely come on top out of the rookies, not only because of the superior machinery that he has at AlphaTauri, but also like just seeing his pace and his during testing. I mean, he came 2nd after Max Verstappen, which is incredible for someone who's just getting to grips with the new F1 car. I'm also a bit curious to see how Mazepin will pan out, because he's getting a lot of stick as well for his reckless, dangerous driving, which I think some people are a bit nervous about, about him, getting mad and maybe causing an accident. So I hope that doesn't get too much in the way. But I think Tsunoda will do well.
Keeping on that topic then of Haas, everyone anticipates that the backmarker battle is going to be them versus Williams. Obviously, Williams have got George Russell. He's going to be gunning for a Mercedes seat in 22. And on the subject of pay drivers, they've got Latifi, but he was still handy in the junior formulas. They've obviously got all the new money coming now as well, the new ownership as well. So do you think that gap between the backmarkers and the rest of the midfield is going to close up? And if not, do you think one's going to get left behind? And who do you think is going to come out on top in the end?
I think personally, Haas will get left behind. They've already said they're not going to be developing this car beyond testing. So if their pace isn't there in week 1, then it's probably not going to be there for the rest of the season. I think obviously with 2 rookie drivers, they're taking the season as a season of surviving and getting through to the new regulations. So I think they if they get a couple of points, then I think they've said that they'll be happy with their season if they even get 1 or 2 points. In terms of Williams, I think they'll close the gap. I think they'll definitely overtake Haas. I think they've almost put all of their eggs in a handful of baskets in terms of designing their car for 4 or 5 tracks. And if they're quick at those 4 or 5 tracks, then you could see them surprising people and getting really good results at the different circuits. And almost they've almost designed it with those circuits in mind and disregarding the rest of the season, which could be an interesting strategy with their development. I think from testing, their car doesn't do well in the wind, which obviously will be a bit of an issue at Bahrain. But they could put in a couple of strong showings, and George Russell will be keen to prove that he is Mercedes' next World Championship winner. Latifi, I think, will again be looking to prove himself as more than just the pay driver. And I mean, we've seen glimpses of some talent there, but he'll be looking to show that he is a talented driver and he can do it in Formula One, which and will try and cement his seat for 2022. Obviously, with the new money coming in, then they might be looking to go down another avenue, and he'll be looking to make sure that he is indispensable to the team.
Yeah, and Russell's improving so much lately. I think he showed his true worth when he was given the chance in the Mercedes car last season when Hamilton had COVID. Such a shame that Mercedes had a bit of a mishap there. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Russell can push the car forward. And I think as well Williams had some management changes, so it'll be interesting to see how that'll work out for them.
Yeah, no, for me, just this car Haas. I don't think Haas is going to score anything this season. I mean, they've as Ivan said, they've already said that they're not good about the car. They've got 2 rookie drivers. I think that they are a customer team already. I think it is just a matter of discarding the season and just sort of seeing if they can then push for next year and future years. As a Williams, I think Williams is in danger of becoming a Mercedes junior team almost. I know obviously Latifi is part of the Williams Academy, which is also different, but Russell is Mercedes Academy driver, and he is looking for that Mercedes promotion for even next season if Bottas fails to impress or if Hamilton just pulls out Mercedes. And I fear they're in danger of becoming that. So in a way, I kind of hope that they do manage to push themselves and sort of close that gap further. They did it last season. I mean, compared to 2 seasons ago, where there was no way they could even think about contending the points. And they got several 11th places this year. There were times when they were close to getting 10th and getting some points in. So I think certainly the 9th and 10th place will be between those 2, but I feel as if perhaps Williams can make that step and make that push, and who knows, maybe even next year with regulation changes, it might suit them well.
So you're talking about Haas a little bit there. Obviously, everyone that's watched Drive to Survive knows they're famous for the arguments between the drivers and Gunter's random little comments and little decisions and things in his little interviews and phone calls with Gene Haas. Looking at Drive to Survive a little bit, then obviously the 3rd series has come out now. Obviously, all 4 of us are people that have watched F1, are really keen, avid F1 viewers anyway. But how important is having shows like that being on Netflix yearly and giving that inside access, firstly for us as fans that have been there for a while, and then secondly for encouraging new fans and new markets?
No, I think Drive to Survive is great to get more people into the sport. I think it's definitely done that as well with some of my housemates who've never watched Formula One before, but they can really get into Drive to Survive because I think it shows the more human aspect of Formula One. The rivalries, the inside stories, and storytelling. I think everyone can get on board with that. You don't have to like fast cars, but I think the whole dynamic of it, everyone's so competitive. Everyone kind of has that asshole quality about them. Excuse my profanity there, but I do think I sometimes do have an issue with Drive to Survive because I do think sometimes some characters get more airtime than others. There is a bit of sensationalization going on there, trying to make things bigger than they actually are. But I think maybe since we're all quite in the thick of it with Formula One, we can maybe kind of be a bit too critical of stuff like that. But sometimes I feel like balanced narrative is kind of missing. Focusing on one teammate rather than the other is sometimes a bit problematic. But overall, it's very good to get more people into the sport.
I think I agree. It has proved to be really invaluable in getting new people into the sport. It's an accessible way for people to sort of get to know the drivers and get to know the teams. I think there are also some bits that have annoyed some of the more committed fans, like using team radio that's like 2 seasons old to sort of for different incidents. Like I think at one point in the season 3, they used a bit of Vettel's team radio from 2019 or something for when Vettel and Leclerc collided, which obviously is not great if you're a committed fan, but they do it for the narrative and to make it accessible for people. And I think before Liberty Media came in, the sport had sort of stagnated a bit and wasn't really appealing for new people coming in. And by sort of producing a show like this, where they focus on the drivers and the rivalries, it really helps to bring people in. And although there is more focus on some drivers than others, I think certainly for this season, I can sort of forgive that, because they had to stick with the teams that they were almost signed up with for their camera crews because of the coronavirus regulations. So if there were big stories, they might have missed them because they weren't there to film it. But certainly that is a problem that we have seen in other series, where they just don't talk about certain drivers who might have had a really good season that isn't touched upon at all, that they possibly should address. But then again, they only have 10 episodes of 40 minutes long, so there's only a limited thing that they can look at.
And I say we saw I saw, most of us probably will have, the tweet that George Russell put out about the fact he wasn't in it at all, which was quite amusing. But again, it keeps the drivers active, and with the likes of him and Lando and Carlos and Charles being so active on social media as well, that helps grow the following. And like you said, at the end of the day, the main thing is that it gives you that behind the scenes access. I mean, I don't quite think anyone wanted to see the behind the scenes access quite literally to Valtteri Bottas, but it does give you the rest of that really good inside track. And hopefully this season they'll be allowed a little bit more chopping and changing, and being able to change things up if they need to jump in at the last minute to film other teams if there's changeovers or whatever. Go ahead.
I think for F1 fans, I think, when you watch it, it's not just you're watching cars go around a track. You're watching the people themselves, the drivers themselves, and you sort of, when you get into sport, you get a sense of what each driver's like and what they're like behind the scenes, and what each race sort of means to them. Like, Gasly's win back at Monza last year, for people who had sort of just heard the story, or people who didn't even know about sort of what happened in the last 12 months with him, it was a nice win. But if you know about his career in F1, about Antoine Hubert, all that other stuff, it was like so much more than just a win. And I feel like Drive to Survive in a way helps people really get a sense of personality. Sometimes it's superficial, like in this season they tried to create some kind of rivalry between Lando and Carlos Sainz in season 3, and that was just shocking to watch. But because obviously they're like best mates. But yeah, I feel like it sort of helps people get that perspective more, in terms of it's not just cars driving around the track. They are, there are people in those cars. They have their own personalities, and it really helps people get into the driver's side of it, not just the mechanical side of it.
Yeah, I think with sort of them trying to create stories out of nothing, another thing that they did this season that possibly wasn't as accurate as it was, and they made it much more sort of spectacular than it was Ricciardo's move, that they sort of made that seem like Ricciardo had stabbed Renault in the back and done all these sort of dodgy dealings behind the scenes, and Cyril was there getting really, really angry. That just sort of you didn't really get the sense that actually happened during the season. But then again, I mean, if that sort of the drama gets people into it, then the important thing is that more people are watching the sport, and it grows around the world.
Yeah, and I think as well, looking at it, it's one thing you can say about Drive to Survive in terms of the big serious moments. They are incredibly understanding to the circumstances. So you look at, you've already talked about Hubert's very, very sad death back in Spa. They covered that, I thought, incredibly well and incredibly poignantly. Grosjean's one this time, I thought they over-egged it a little bit, I've got to be honest. And I think they should have shown him getting out nice and early, obviously, like happened in real time. But the one thing for me that was good about it is it does bring the human side of things into it. And in fact, they talked to Ian Roberts, they had him and his wife, they had him actually being able to talk about his experience, talk about what his kids had said and what his kids had felt. I know we keep talking about, or I keep talking about the behind the scenes access, but it does give you that understanding of of what the drivers are like. And yes, they are brilliant, super fast drivers, but they are real people. And I thought they covered that with the Bottas episode really well as well this time around. So moving back onto the actual action on the track itself then, for all of you, first of all, I suppose the big question, we've kind of already touched on it, do you think it will be 8 in a row for Lewis and 8 in a row for Merck, or do you think Red Bull will spring a surprise in one of those championships at least?
I think it'll be 8 in a row for both. Mercedes have just got such a strong platform to build off that I can't see them slipping back. And they've just, if you look at recent seasons, their consistency has been remarkable. Even if they have a couple of less strong races at the start of the season and Red Bull seem to be stretching away, Mercedes historically have managed to get a march on everyone in terms of in-season development and have just put in consistent results throughout the season, and that has brought them championships. I can't look past Mercedes, even with their dodgy test. I think it will be 8 in a row for Lewis and for Mercedes.
Perhaps this is a bold call, but I think in terms of drivers' championship, I definitely think Hamilton will win. I think he's still as good as he was when he first joined Mercedes, if not better. I think that's pretty much in the bag. Mercedes is still very much at the top. But in terms of Constructors' Championships, I think Red Bull will probably take it. Bottas is a very reliable second driver. He can consistently put in fast lap times. He can win races. He can get pole positions. And if not else, then he can just come second consistently. But the driver combination plus all the sort of Red Bull giving it this last push before regulations change, the driver combination with Verstappen and Perez, I think that is absolutely lethal. In my opinion, it is probably the best driver pair on the grid, and I feel that neither of them may be able to actually win the Drivers' Championship, but in terms of the points they gather together, I think the Red Bull will win the Constructors.
No, I agree with that as well, that Bottas is reliable second man, but I think Max did so well last season to prove that he can sometimes outperform Bottas with a worse car. So I think in terms of driver abilities there, and Checo finally being able to kind of be a good teammate to Max, because Max has consistently outperformed his teammates, and Checo is really, he has the experience. He also says that he feels like he has nothing to lose, right? Because last season he thought he wouldn't have a seat. So he's this man back from the dead, kind of driving with all he's got. So I think definitely Constructors' Champion will be an interesting one. In terms of the world champion, yeah, you would say Lewis. Logically, you'd say Lewis, and with statistics and everything. But based on his comments afterwards, of course, we can't know if they're true or not, but he feels a lot less secure with the car and doesn't feel as comfortable. So I really hope Verstappen can kind of mix things up. But of course, this is a very biased perspective where I'm coming from, but I'd love to see it.
And just a final one from me then, before we do like some quick fire predictions at the end. Do you think it will be 8 and out for Lewis if he does win the title this season, or do you think he will, provided he gets that 8th world title, stay on for another year into the regulation changes? Because obviously him and Bottas have both only got 1-year deals with Mercedes.
I think it'll be 8 and out, personally. I don't think he'll risk going into a season with such significant regulation changes. He'll look to bow out at the top when he's still dominant, because who knows what the regulation changes could throw up. And obviously he's just got the 1-year contract, and if he does win the championship, then it is a perfect opportunity for him to sort of say, that's me, I've done everything that I wanted to in my career. I mean, if he wins the championship, then he'll probably get to 100 wins and probably 100 poles as well. So I mean, unless he's suddenly really, really motivated to continue, I think it's unlikely. and he'll seed, and Russell will come through, or well, we'll see what they do with Bottas. But yeah.
I agree with you there, Alexander. I think Aiden out because as well, I think he has a lot of interest now outside of F1. He's got a lot of projects, and he's turned a lot very political recently. So I think definitely he has interest out of there that he'd potentially like to follow up. Like you said, why would he risk going into another season where he could be put back into the mix? I think he's been so dominant throughout. It would be great for him, I think personally, to just leave on a high, have that GOAT status, and kind of look back happily on that and pursue perhaps some other directions, maybe in relation to Formula One or elsewhere.
I think Aiden out is definitely a possibility. It will probably be one of the greatest sports walk-offs of all time. By far, if he wins 8 championships, in my opinion, he's probably, I would say he is the greatest British sportsman of all time, and certainly one of the greatest sportsmen or women, full stop, of all time. But he's up there in the pantheon, I'm trying to say. But I feel what I hope in a way I don't think it was the Mercedes, but I hope in a way he may go to another team and do what other previous sort of champions have done and help them out. I mean, we saw Schumacher do it. He left the sport, then came back to Mercedes a few seasons later and sort of helped them build from the ground up. You could argue Vettel's doing that now with Aston Martin. Alonso's doing it. Kimi's doing it. I think it's a bit of a trend right now for the veteran drivers, the successful ones, to then go back down to lower down teams in the grid and sort of help them build up. Equally, if he did leave, it wouldn't come as a shock. He's got so many different things going on right now. Social activism. He's collaborating with Tommy Hilfiger. He's got his own team in the new Extreme E series, I think it is, Team X44. Nico Rosberg also has a team, and that's quite funny. It wouldn't shock me if he did, but in a way, I kind of hope he stays and just helps out one of those sort of perhaps not successful teams.
So there's always been that talk about him potentially going to Ferrari at some point, hasn't there? And without wishing to be rude, they are at the moment a not quite so successful team. So it would be quite a nice fairy tale ending there, but I don't see them getting rid of Charles, because obviously he's team number 1. He's been locked in for 5 years, and they've put their money where their mouth is with Carlos as well. And you wouldn't want to see a driver like him thrown to the side, even if it is for Lewis Hamilton. So to finish up then, we've already answered some of these anyway, but we'll just go around and do some quick fire predictions from each of you. Starting off again then, I know we've already asked it, but who do you think will be the driver's champion?
I think it'll be Lewis Hamilton.
Hamilton.
I'll spice it up and say Max.
We've already covered constructors, so I won't do that one again. Who do you think will be the biggest surprise package this season?
I think it'll be Tsunoda.
I'm going to say Giovinazzi. I think he can prove himself this season.
I think it cut out. I'd say Tsunoda as well.
And then, again, we kind of touched on it earlier, but who do you think will be we'll go to most underwhelming driver and most underwhelming team?
Most underwhelming driver, I'll say Alonso. Most underwhelming team, I think Haas.
I was going to say Bottas, most underwhelming driver, but he has underwhelmed consistently. No offense, but he has underwhelmed consistently. I feel like, so other than him, I personally think Kimi. I think he is nearing the end of his F1 career. In terms of most underwhelming team, I feel probably Ferrari again. I think that they will not repeat what happened last year, but certainly not be anywhere near their top form.
For underwhelming driver, I'd say Ocon. I think he really needs to prove himself this season against Alonso. He really has to show what he's made of. In terms of underwhelming team, I'd maybe say Alpine probably, but we'll see.
And a final one then, just to finish up. For each of you, the driver most likely to win that's a non-Mercedes and non-Red Bull driver win a race this season.
Daniel Ricciardo.
Daniel Ricciardo.
Daniel Ricciardo.
That was easy.
That was very easy there. I was going to say, just well,
No.
I mean, that's what I'm hoping will happen.
I think it's one of those, isn't it? Just slight tangent. I think obviously everyone's seen McLaren improve in the last couple of years. See, Danny's come in now. He's 31. He's at his peak. I think everyone would love to see McLaren take that final step right back to the top, get that first win since 2012, and actually finally be competing at the front again. And the idea of Danny Rick and Lando Norris both being able to compete regularly for podiums and the occasional race win, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
As a McLaren fan, sort of the last however many years, like the Honda era was just so much pain, so frustrating, and just seemed like we were getting nowhere. And then sort of moving into getting the development, progressing. It's been, hopefully if we can continue that this year, then it'll be brilliant. Happy days, Lando and Danny Rick, to cement the third step in the teams, and hopefully look to challenge the Mercedes and Red Bull in a couple of races at least. Would just be wonderful.
I'm really hoping that Mercedes power unit just works wonders. I mean, like seeing Ricciardo do a shoey last season, it was great. But I mean, seeing him do on top step of the podium, that would be something else.
Awesome. Well, if it's okay with everyone, then, unless they've got anything else, unless you've all got anything else you want to add, we'll leave it there so I don't take up too much more of your evenings. Thank you very much to Alex, to Will, to Floris for joining me, and thank you very much for watching this today. Everyone's either going to look like a genius in 12 months' time, or they're going to look as much of a muppet as I was when I predicted the Six Nations table earlier this year. But thanks very much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and as I said at the end of the last video, if you're interested in running for any positions for Exposé next year, make sure you're on the Exposé members page, where they've just posted the online guide on how to run for committee elections. So thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you again for the next one.